Welcome to the Clear Admit MBA Admissions Podcast. I'm Graham Richmond, and this is your wiretaps for Monday, June 16th, 2025. I'm joined by Alex Brown from Cornwall, England. Alex, how are things going?
Very good, thank you, Graham.
So Alex is a former admissions officer from the Wharton School, current Clear Admit community manager and podcaster, and you also teach digital marketing at some top business schools, including Columbia and LBS. And I'm the co-founder of Clear Admit, also worked in admissions at Wharton, where I first met you, Alex, and I have an MBA from that program as well. Let's get right into it. Has there been any action on the wires, or is it really, we're getting towards orientation time for people starting in the fall. Some of these students start showing up in late July. So has there been any movement on waitlists or any kind of news?
It's still the middle of June, Graham. There's going to be plenty of news, right?
Maybe. I don't know. I'm kind of wondering if,
I saw on LiveWire last week, Wharton took some folks off their wait list. That tends to then create a domino effect with some schools, in the next tier down or something. So I would imagine there's still going to be movement. Obviously, there's still a lot of uncertainty in the international market in terms of international students. So put your seatbelts on and see what happens. The next few weeks might still be some significant activity.
Yeah, I would argue that if ever there was a year where it might be a good thing to be on the wait list as a domestic candidate,
yes,
it's this year, right? Because I think what's going to happen is with the lack of visa interviews and interviews visas being denied, et cetera, there's going to be some international volume that cannot make it to these schools in the fall in America. And so if you're on a U.S. program's waitlist and you are American living in the States and it's really easy for you to pick up and show up, then I think there's going to be movement as we head into July. Yeah, for sure.
And that's the key, to make sure that they're signaling to schools that they're really flexible.
Yeah.
So now that you're on that summer waitlist, for anyone that is on the summer waitlist and is, a U.S. citizen, showing or making sure the school recognizes that you have that degree of flexibility and you really want to attend, et cetera, is a very good approach at this point.
Yeah, agreed. Other stuff that I wanted to tackle before we get into our candidates this week, let's get into the latest in the war on universities. It was kind of a quieter week. The U.S. has some other things going on at the moment, unfortunately. But I did read that there is an update coming probably by the time this podcast airs on the visa interview slots opening up. And so apparently the government has said they will give us news in the next few days. So I'm hoping that news is, yes, we've revamped the process to include, more extensive social media checks or whatever they're trying to add, and that, interview slots are now open again, because there is a backlog of individuals who are unable to schedule an interview and need to in order to get their visa in time for fall classes. So stay tuned there. We did run a great summary of this entire saga from the very beginning where, the Trump administration clamped down and said, Harvard can't have any international students, all the way through to, the latest events. And so that was written by Peggy from our team. And yeah, that's up on the site. Really good read if you want to just understand the context and everything that's going on with this. But we will continue to keep everyone posted for sure.
Yeah, and obviously we just talked about the potential advantage of domestic candidates that are still on the wait list because of all this uncertainty. But yeah, our thoughts and feelings certainly go to international candidates that are caught in this ridiculous situation that we found ourselves. Quite honestly, Graham, I'm just still shocked by it all.
Yeah, it is crazy.
And upset by it all. Not just surprised, but really upset by it all. It's just not the America that I know well.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And I also did one other tidbit. I was reading just before we came on air that apparently part of this sort of Chinese tariff deal is going to include the, quote, opening up of universities to Chinese nationals again, because Trump had threatened no Chinese visas, they can't come to our schools as part of this negotiation. And so apparently now that they're kind of seem to be reaching an agreement, that's part of it. So I'm hoping that all this sort of opens up, that people can get their visa interviews and get visas, and that this will all be under the bridge. But we will see. Yeah, but I definitely thoughts go out to anyone who's in limbo for sure.
Yeah.
One thing we're doing in July is we're coming back with our Essay Insights webinar series. It's the most popular webinar series that we run every year. And what we do is we sit down with a handful of admissions directors over the course of a month. We do one event each week over the course of a month, and we pepper them with questions about their essay topics and how to answer their essay questions. So you can sign up for these events. You just go to bit.ly/MBA Essay 0725. So that's our July series. I would list all the schools, but they're literally, there's like 20 of them. So I'll just tell you that, we've got Chicago Booth and MIT Sloan and Duke and who else? Wharton and LBS, INSEAD. I mean, the list is pretty long. Georgetown, Berkeley. I'll go into it as we get closer to the dates, but they're going to air every Wednesday in July at, I think, noon Eastern. So sign up for those if you haven't yet. It should be a lot of fun. I typically MC those, and I believe I'm going to do all of them this summer. So it should be fun.
Are these the most popular webinar series that we host?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, historically, we'll see if if the numbers match up. But I see the early signups are going quite well. So yeah, this should be really good.
Yeah, this is for those obviously that are applying next season. We're switching into that season now. I think this is a terrific series. So yeah, enjoy hosting, Graham, and I'll look forward to learning myself. Obviously, we learn from these events ourselves, and that helps inform us and so forth. So yeah, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, over on the website, we did an interesting piece about. So Stanford GSB has this podcast called If Then, where they basically, the host, this guy named Kevin Kuhl. Now that's a podcast name host, man. I wish my last name was Cool. But anyway, Kevin Kuhl interviews a professor at Stanford's business school for each episode. And they did this one with a professor at Stanford whose name is Amir Goldberg, and he's a professor of organizational behavior, okay? And he has been taking all kinds of qualitative data to help to basically use AI to understand innovation. And there's always this long-held debate about, does innovation exist at the fringes or in the center in terms of where is innovation coming from? And it's hard to measure that. But what he decided to do was upload just insane amounts of data from, quarterly earnings calls, descriptions of strategy from, consultancies and companies, congressional records, judicial rulings, like everything he could find that might touch on where innovations are happening. And, he found like millions, obviously, of useful examples. And the problem is all of these examples are immensely unstructured, right? So he kind of uploaded all this stuff into AI, and AI within a matter of, minutes is able to kind of quickly assemble and provide some structure. And as it turns out, it does seem that innovation is mostly happening on the fringes. So smaller firms, spin-outs, smaller courts making rulings about things where people are starting to think differently. So anyway, you can listen to the podcast, but we wrote an article about this because it was so fascinating.
Surely as a Stanford piece of research, couldn't they just read that really good book out of Harvard called Innovator's Dilemma? Would have answered the same question in the same way.
Yeah, although I guess the key here is they're backing it up with a lot of data in terms of, in ways that we couldn't before AI. So this is, another innovation out of AI. We always run admissions tips, and there'll be more and more of them this time of year as people start to think about applying for next season. So we ran a tip on the site about considering the campus, and it just got some really helpful tips about how to think through what are the areas that you should be looking at when you're talking about a business school's campus, the facilities, the surroundings, the atmosphere. So read that tip if you're kind of trying to put together your list of schools and wondering about these things. We also, Alex, I'm really excited to report we've now started our admissions director Q&A series for the 25-26 application cycle. And first out of the gate is Stephanie Kluth from ESMT Business School in Berlin. There will be, we have like dozens of these lined up, and they're going to come out over the course of the summer. We're going to talk to admissions directors at every top business school on the planet. So stay tuned. Those are great reads if you're applying to the school in question. I mean, I would argue you kind of have to read it really good stuff.
And also each year we add different, a set of different questions to the AdCom Q&As. We call them AdCom Q&As. So I can't remember the new questions that we introduced this year off the top of my head, but yeah, the insights we gain from these Q&As is I think it's absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, and I love some of the questions we asked year in and year out are about like just like how they process files, how they like what's their
Yeah.
structure and the operation behind the scenes. I just love getting that kind of peek behind the curtain. So yeah, so read those. There'll be more of them coming. And then we had two Real Humans alumni candidates that we talked with. We talked with Akanksha, who graduated from the Ohio State Fisher MBA program back in 23 and now works at Uber Freight as a senior program manager. So Akanksha she's 33, originally from India, went to, it sounds like an engineering program in India before coming to business school in the US. And actually her work experience prior was with, it sounds like with Samsung. So 7 years of work experience, and it sounded like Samsung, but in their heavy industries division. So it says here that she was involved with oil and gas. So they must do some kind of, I don't know what they're making for that industry because my knowledge is pretty limited of Samsung. But I think of them as smartphones, but they're obviously doing a lot of other things. So she had that work experience, and then went off to Ohio State, and now has pivoted into Uber Freight. And we said, what's one thing that you would change or do differently as part of the job search? And she said, and I thought this was great advice. She said, I would spend less time directly applying for jobs. Instead, if a role piqued my interest, I would connect with professionals in similar roles. By understanding the nuances of the position and the company culture, I would tailor my approach more effectively and determine if the role truly aligns with my goals. So I think she's touching on something that's really important because it's really easy to resume drop and kind of just apply to lots of roles when you see them come across the career services desk in business school, right? But her point is, you know what? Figure out if you want that job first by talking to people who've worked in that role. And I think that's good advice because it's easy to apply to lots of roles and probably to do less good of a job at applying to all those roles. Whereas if you sort of do some filtering, gather some information, you can be better off.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it takes time and effort to do it that way around, but you're going to be more focused in your approach, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I imagine Samsung is just a huge conglomerate of lots of different businesses across lots of different industries out in, I assume it's South Korea. And so forth. So yeah, fantastic.
Yeah. So they're definitely they're probably competing with Caterpillar or somebody like that, and some of these things. I don't know. So we also talked to there was a second alum that we caught up with. Her name is Emerald. She graduated from Washington Olin, their MBA program, also back in 23, and she is a strategic financial analyst at Google. Emerald's background really interesting. She's 33 now. Is from, I'm going to say this wrong, I'm guessing, but she's from Tokoko, which is in the Volta region of Ghana. And she studied at the University of Ghana, studied business as an undergrad. And before business school, worked in retail banking at a trust bank in Ghana. So in that kind of banking and financial services sector, had more than 6 years of work experience, and then went to Washington Olin, got the MBA. And we said, what's one piece of advice you wish you had been given during your MBA? And she says, experiment boldly. I wish someone had told me that the MBA is the perfect playground for bold experimentation. It's one of the few times in life where you can test drive ideas, whether it's launching a startup, building an app, exploring a creative business like fashion, or pivoting into a whole new industry without the pressure of having it all figured out. For someone like me, who thrives at the intersection of strategy, creativity, and innovation, I now realize I could have leaned into that freedom even earlier. The MBA is more than a launch pad. It's a lab. So what do you think about that, Alex? Because this is kind of, we've had this sort of back and forth about, is it time to explore? Is it time to really focus in?
Yeah, I completely agree with this sentiment, but I think it makes better sense as you come into the MBA program with a clear set of goals and understanding of why you're there, right? Once you've sort of developed that, then yeah, go ahead and experiment and explore, but within the context of really recognizing what you're there for and so forth. So you don't just end up with a complete a scatter approach, and you're experimenting every week with something different. That just wouldn't work. in my book anyway.
Yeah, I agree. It's this isn't, these things can live side by side. Like this idea of what you want to do, what you want to get out of it, but you carve out some time to do some different things as well, right? So
and my argument is the more you know what you want to do, the more you have the freedom then to experiment within that sort of boundary, within that context, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not to say you shouldn't experiment with things that are completely different. Because there's always value in what you're doing. It's just recognizing that you still have a strong rudder guiding you through the MBA journey.
Yeah, totally. So I think those are the kind of updates from the site. We've got candidates to talk about this week as always. I did want to remind people, you can write to us at info@clearadmit.com. The other thing I would just like to say is, we could really use some help spreading the word about the podcast. This is the time of year where the folks who've been with us all season are now maybe, have their offers in hand and might be heading off to business school. So please just pass it along. This is a small podcast. We don't have a giant marketing budget. So tell people that are applying to business school about this show. They'll thank you for it, we hope. and yeah, just spread the word, because that's how people find out. And we have a new crop of folks tuning in, each year for the most part. So we need your help in that regard. Would you agree, Alex?
Yeah, let's see if we could double our audience from what, 2 to 4, 3 to 6.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Let's start talking about the candidates, unless there's anything else you add.
No, let's kick on.
All right. So this is Wiretap's candidate number 1. Our first candidate this week has 10 schools on the target list, and it's a really high-end group. It's Columbia, Tuck, Duke, Harvard, Michigan, MIT, Kellogg, NYU, Stanford, and Booth. So really kind of top 16 exclusive there. They want to start school in the fall of 26. They have been working as an engineer, but in the government, so in a for a municipality. They are looking to pivot out of that into consulting. They mention companies like Kearney, Bain, Booz Allen, and BCG. They have a 337 on the GRE, one of the highest scores I've ever seen that we've talked about on the show, at least. They have a 2.96 undergraduate GPA, so a bit lower there. 8 years of work experience. They're located in Canada, and they would love to land either in Canada or the USA after business school. And they do ask for specific feedback. They recognize that their background's somewhat non-traditional because they've been, the 8 years experience in municipal government at the city level in kind of engineering roles. They do share that they're male, the Canadian citizen, but they are a first-generation immigrant. They actually moved from South Asia at a young age. You and I were debating, Alex, what does that mean, South Asia? I'm guessing India, Pakistan, something like that. So that's where they're from, presumably. They're the first in their family to attend college. They have some certificates in their industry, professional engineer, scrum master, all that kind of stuff. And they do some things outside of school. They do some mentoring of junior engineers. They, do some volunteer work in underserved villages abroad. So they help to fund and deliver infrastructure projects like building wells, homes, schools, etc. And that's kind of been inspired by their sort of personal background and roots. Alex, what do you make of this candidacy? Because I think, there's a lot to like in terms of a non-traditional background with government work, but they also, and obviously a stellar GRE score, but that GPA is below the 3.0 threshold. So, yeah, what do you make of this candidate?
Yeah, I think there's quite a lot to like about this candidate. And then, as you say, there are a couple of hurdles that they've got to overcome in the admissions process, especially as they're targeting, as you say, M7 top 16. They're going quite high with their list of target programs. So yeah, 337 GRE, absolutely fantastic. They're clearly very smart. But they're going to have to overcome this 2.96 or whatever it is GPA. They're going to need to, write a short explanation in the optional essays that sort of provide context. There was an upward curve, I think, in the last couple of years, et cetera, et cetera. And obviously, being first gen and various other things might have complicated that first couple of years of undergraduate. But they're going to have to overcome that. Just because they have an outstanding GRE score doesn't mean to say that the schools will dismiss the lower than average GPA. Far from it. That's a record of 4 years of academic experience. So that stands for a lot. That's going to be a little bit of a concern, and maybe some of their professional certificates will help in this regard too. But I know oftentimes you're not as completely bought in that regard as perhaps I might be. But so yeah, the GPA is a concern. 8 years of experience is at the longer end of the spectrum, so they're going to have to really show fit. And that sort of why MBA, why now sort of aspect of their articulation. I think they're going to have to target the first rounds. They qualify themselves as being non-traditional, but I think they need to approach admissions thinking that perhaps they're going to be a little bit overrepresented, at least demographically. If they're from India and so forth. So I would certainly target the first rounds. I think really lean into the quality of their work experience and their impact and growth, et cetera, and really lean into the volunteer work that they're doing in infrastructure, in remote villages and so forth, because I do think that ties a little bit to their long-term goal, post-consulting. And I like that. I think they can make a really interesting narrative around focusing on that long-term goal and the steps now that they're taking to get there, which will include consulting in the short run. But yeah, I think round one. They're going to have to overcome some of this GPA issue and just consider themselves potentially overrepresented. Don't think of themselves as non-traditional, Graham.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like what would keep me up at night on this candidacy would be, if they get labeled as, well, this is an engineer, they're older, and they're from India or Pakistan originally. So that would be overrepresented, right? Whereas if you look at it from the other side, you say, oh, Canadian, not quite as represented, working in municipal government. So there's sort of this, two sides to it. But I do think that the problem, if they are looked at it overrepresented, is that GPA, where they're going to be in a pool that has very high test scores, very high, sort of numbers in general. So yeah, I would almost encourage them, if they're willing to, they probably need to narrow this list. I mean, 10 schools is too many to apply to successfully, especially when you think about the burden you're going to put on your recommenders, et cetera. But also they might need to narrow and expand the list at the same time. So what I mean by that is narrow it down to 6+ or so schools, but maybe think about whether there's a school outside of the top 16 that they might consider. Because I worry that if they wait and get bad results in round one, it might be hard in round two.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I mean, just in terms of thinking about what they want to do, I'm just thinking, are there other programs out there that could help them get there? And, I'm thinking about Tepper. I'm thinking about, are there any other schools out there that they would be happy to attend that, just might give them slightly better odds too? That's my take on this. But yeah.
As you were articulating that, the first school that came to my mind was Tepper. So, but the point is, don't wait until round two, getting your results from round one, to then readjust and maybe go after a couple of schools in that top 20 band. It's really important to come up with that strategy for round one if you are potentially considered as being overrepresented. That's an important point. So yeah, if you think actually Tepper might be a good fit for them, or if they think that, they need to do Tepper in round one, not wait.
Yeah, agreed. So I do want to thank them for sharing their profile. Hopefully this is all good food for thought. And I agree with you. They got to be out in front on this GPA thing. And I will say they did the one thing you need to do when you have a low GPA, which is absolutely ace the test, right? So they've done that, but they'll need to just briefly explain. I want to wish them the best of luck. Hopefully they'll keep us posted of how things go. Let's move on, though, and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 2. So our second candidate this week is applying to 6 schools. They want to start in the fall of 26. Their target list includes Duke, Michigan, MIT, NYU, UChicago, and Yale. And this person has been working in data and analytics consulting They actually have nearly, 4.5 years of experience, and their GRE score is a 327. Their GPA is a 3.8. They're hoping to work in technology after business school, and they mentioned the likes of Apple and HP and LinkedIn, Lenovo. They gave us a long list of potential targets. They would like to land in the South, and that's where they're currently located. They also shared some demographic information. This is a 26-year-old female candidate, Asian American, and also is part of the LGBT community. They went to undergrad at a top 5 public undergrad program, and they majored in information systems and stats. And they've been doing this, as I said, data and analytics consulting. They've had a promotion. They've had a whole different number of engagements that they've been involved in. And, they've even had leadership experience where they've been leading different work streams, overseeing offshore resources on a long-term engagement. So they've had what I would argue is very good work experience. They also have interesting extracurriculars. They'd worked as a photojournalist as an undergrad, as one of their outside activities. They've done a lot of work in kind of digital transformation consulting. And even kind of more recently, they do quite a bit of work with a local LGBT nonprofit. So they're looking to pivot into a leadership role. I think that this is their view is that the MBA is going to really help them get to the next step in their career, which is, very traditional kind of way to use the degree. Alex, what do you make of this candidacy?
I'm sorry, did they put a long-term goal down in their profile? I didn't write it down.
Yeah, so they said that they want to, get into a leadership role where they're owning something and providing strategic direction instead of simply being in an advisory role, which is what they've been doing as, in this kind of consulting type of work.
Yeah.
Now, they say that, they don't really give us like a very long-term plan, but I'm guessing that if they want to work at a big tech company in that type of role, that they'll gradually kind of rise in the ranks there. But maybe they have some other plan, but that's all they've said.
Yeah. So product management, owning a product, et cetera, I get that. I mean, quite frankly, Graham, I think this is a really strong candidate for lots of different reasons. I mean, obviously, as it contrasts with our first candidate, I mean, that 3.8 GPA really sort of resonates, right? Again, schools, I mean, test scores are important. Don't get me wrong. And I certainly I'm not a big fan of these test waiver type situations, but the GPA shows 4 years of commitment and evidence, et cetera. So 3.8 GPA, that's very good. She was also quite involved on campus, et cetera. 327 GRE is sort of at the median for top programs, maybe slightly below. And so forth. So from a numbers standpoint, very good. Demographically, very good. Impact growth at work looks really strong. She describes her work experience as being quite ordinary, but I think I quite like that humble approach too, right? But as you say, she's led work streams, managing folks and so forth. And she's done some things in her extracurriculars that resonate really well. So I think this candidate, maybe they need to throw their hat in the ring at Harvard, Stanford, or Wharton. If they want tech product management or whatever, maybe it's more Stanford, Wharton, or whatever it might be. At least I identify one of those. The key is with a candidate like this, she could get admitted to all the programs she's targeting, right? Mm-hmm. Is that ideal? Or would she then wonder, should I have aimed a little bit higher, right? So my point is, apply to Wharton 2. If they get denied, at least they know where they get admitted. That was their limit, right? So my point is more, how do you identify the top schools? Make sure you get access to the very best programs you could get access to. And in her case, I would have a look at Stanford and Wharton at least, maybe even Harvard or whatever. Not necessarily all three. Add that to their target list, Graham.
Yeah, I agree. I think what you're saying is basically that, there's this strong chance that she may be underestimating her kind of ability to get into some of these very top programs. And I think of the schools on her list, Kellogg and MIT are really great when it comes to these sort of tech PM type jobs. But yeah, it might be interesting to look at a Stanford or a Wharton as well. I love the work experience. The thing that also jumps out at me, and I mentioned this, but like you were saying, 3.8, but it's not just a 3.8. She went to a top 5 public university in America, she says, and that means UCLA, Berkeley, UVA, Michigan. These are all really good schools. So to have that high of a GPA, at a very good school, it just further underlines this candidate's abilities. And studying like information systems and statistics, so not exactly basket weaving, right? So
not exactly our.
Oh, I knew you always get me on that. Yeah. So, but yeah. So I think she is really well positioned to.
But that gets back to in our conversation on ApplyWire, I said, is there any scope for improvement on that GRE score? My query wasn't so much you need to improve the GRE to get into these top programs you're targeting. It was more, you got a 3.8 in quite a difficult major at quite a strong university. Is 3.27 really your best score? If they reckon that they could squeeze 3 more points with a bit of dedication, come back with a 3.30, 3.8, everything else looks really strong. That would make Harvard, Stanford, Wharton more accessible, would also drive up scholarship opportunities at any of the schools they're targeting.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going to go, as the scholarship dollars sometimes go up. Not at Stanford and Harvard, which are needs-based, but certainly, the other schools that, you might see full tuition as you start to get up into these big numbers. So in any event, I think the short answer here is, I love this candidacy, very well positioned, and, apply in the first round, which it seems like what she's hoping to do. And just maybe consider some of these very, very top ranked schools to throw into the mix too.
Yeah. But unlike our first candidate, she doesn't have to apply in the first round.
Exactly. Yeah.
She is not overrepresented by any measure.
Yeah.
So my point there is, all right, I'm going to really go after this GRE. So maybe apply to a few of the schools in the first round with the current GRE, with a real plan to come back to the Whartons and the Stanfords or whatever in round 2, with a potentially higher GRE, whatever. That could be really impactful. And then they could report back that increased GRE to schools that they're interviewing with or whatever, to bump up their profiles for schools they're targeting in round 1.
Yeah. So in any event, I think no matter where the chips fall, this person she's gonna she'll end up with something. So appreciate her sharing her profile and engaging with you on the site and stuff. So best of luck. Let's move on though and talk about Wiretap's candidate number 3. So our final candidate this week comes from a DecisionWire entry. So this is someone who's already applied and is kind of waiting there where to go. They applied to Wharton, Chicago, and Darden in this instance, and they're starting school this fall. They did get into both Booth and Darden, did not get into Wharton. They are undecided, though, between Booth and Darden. They want to work in consulting. They have a GRE of 331, and they have a $50,000 scholarship at Darden, no money at Booth. And they note in their post, they said, I'm currently trying to decide between Darden with $25K per year versus full price at Booth. My goal is to recruit for consulting, hopefully getting into one of McKinsey, Bain, or BCG. And then they're looking for advice. So Alex, what do you think of this? This is an interesting dilemma.
It is. There's no easy answer, right? You've got Booth, which is in a tier above Darden. You've got the scholarship differential sort of mitigates that sort of difference in tier. Darden is renowned for being a great place to become a consultant with its case study methodology. If you had 10 people in the same situation, you'd probably get 5 choose Booth and 5 choose Darden. So I think it's incredibly difficult to come up with the right choice. And a lot of it would boil down to exactly where do they want to be post-MBA. If it's in Chicago, then it's Booth. If it's in DC, then that definitely tilts more towards Darden. That would be, Darden would be very strong in that area. But Denver seems top of their list, Graham. So I would scrutinize the alumni networks in Denver to see if, how much of an advantage Booth has there. I assume Booth has the advantage in Denver, but I don't know.
Yeah, so I saw on the site, you asked them like, well, where do you want to be? And they said, yeah, Denver, Chicago, DC. They claim in no particular order, but yeah, I agree with you. Like they need to figure, ideally, like they would have an order because that would help things, right? If we knew that they wanted to be in DC or that they want to be in Chicago, that sort of helps things a little bit. I also just, some of this comes down to what's their risk appetite in terms of debt. Some people would say, no, I'm just going to go to Booth. And, as you said, it's the school in the higher tier. And at the end of the day, in 20 years, what will that $25,000 a year scholarship be to me? But other people might say, oh, no, I actually want to work at MBB, but I'm planning on starting my own business at some point. And so the least debt that I can have on my balance sheet, the better off I am. So yeah, there are a lot of different ways to approach it, but I will say that the case method and Darden's reputation in consulting certainly doesn't hurt alongside the $50,000 they're going to get. So yeah, it would be helpful if we knew where they wanted to be geographically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
In any event, I want to thank them for sharing their dilemma. We love these posts on DecisionWire. I think they're really instructive to others too, because you get a sense for what's being offered in terms of scholarships and how people make these decisions. So really appreciate them sharing that. Alex, we've done it again. We're through our candidates and all the news and notes for the week. It sounds like we're going to connect next week. So are you willing to do this again? I know you're going to be traveling a little bit next week, but we're going to figure out a way to record.
Yeah, I've got the Falmouth Sea Shanty, which means I've got to travel 10 miles. And then I've got a trip to London. So yeah, I've got loads of stuff going. But yeah, absolutely. Next week, can't wait. So stay safe, everyone. Take care.